Hey guys, welcome to the Next Generation podcast, a space run by young people for young people, where we talk about stuff that actually matters to us, whether it's things we deal with every day or big issues shaping our world. Just a quick heads up, some of the things we will talk about today might be a bit sensitive or triggering. If anything makes you feel upset or worried, please don't keep it to yourself. Talk to a trusted adult or check out the services we'll mention at the end of the episode. Thank you so much for being here, and let's get started.
This is Next Generation Podcast, a Sporting Aid project produced by Ragdoll Media, made possible with the help of Safer Streets Bedfordshire, Bedfordshire Community Foundation, Bedford Borough Council, Bedfordshire Police, 4YP UK and Nexus Mentoring.
Welcome back to the podcast. We're here to finish talking off about knife crime. I'm here today with Ryan, Ben, Dexter and myself, Jordan. We've also got a special guest. We have a profession who is also an ex-police officer and an exploitation lead for a charity that works with young people using drugs and alcohol. What are the most common reasons for knife crime among young people in Bedfordshire?
Okay, so I'm not quite sure what the most common reasons for young people involved in knife crime specific to Bedfordshire, but the young people that I have worked with speak to me about wanting to feel protected and potentially using knives as a defence. Although I accept that, I'm aware that there are other factors involved for them. More so, we know that young people who are exposed or involved in knife crime may be more predisposed to relative poverty, exposure to domestic abuse, and also not having good opportunities to access education. Are those your kind of experiences, or is that something that you relate to, or do you feel it's more about protection and defence?
Me personally, I've never been in contact with knife crime, but I think from an opinion point of view, I think it can come from that image type of perspective and protection perspective, where young people feel they need a knife or a weapon to kind of protect themselves from maybe bullies, or if they've gotten themselves involved in gangs, to protect themselves from other opposing gangs or wherever it may be. But some form of protection, I think, is their logic to carrying a weapon and getting involved in knife crime.
Yeah, I think especially the younger people, when they grow up, they listen to certain music and stuff, and they feel the need to carry a knife to protect them, as they see other older people using them in YouTube videos, thinking it's a cool aesthetic to have, when really it's not, because they end up hurting themselves because they don't know what they're doing with the knife. And when they do use it, they regret it because they realise what they've done, they shouldn't have done.
What should someone do if they are threatened with a knife?
Okay, so my advice to any young person who is presented with a knife or threatened with a knife is to run. Run as fast as you can. Don't engage with that. It only ends in either a very significant injury, worst case scenario death, best case scenario frightened. And it's a really scary experience. So don't engage with that. Don't try and defend yourself with someone who's got a weapon, whether that be any sort of blade or any other. Yeah, run. What would you guys, if you could imagine yourselves in an experience where you were presented with a knife, what would you think about doing? What would your natural reactions be?
I would agree with running, because really and truly, once you come in contact with that knife or that weapon, your life is going to change instantly. And I don't think young people understand the consequences of getting in contact with a knife. I think maybe they feel like whoever it is that's presenting them with the knife is the sense of trying to impress that person. But really and truly, that person doesn't necessarily care about that young person. So I feel like running would be the most logical thing to do. Yeah, simply just because once you touch that knife or are in possession of that knife, your life is in a different scenario than it would have been had you ran or, got yourself out of that situation. So yeah, obviously there's different situations where, running might not be an option. You might be in a room where you can't get out or something like that, but trying to find any alternative where you don't come in contact with the knife, I feel like, and doesn't end up harming you. I think that would be the best case scenario.
And what about peer pressure?
Peer pressure it's an ugly thing, to be honest, and I feel like everyone in their life, especially young people, the younger you are, I feel like the more vulnerable you are. And I feel like the younger people are the target in terms of get approached by someone who's older, maybe bigger, and, you know, they might seem scary or intimidating. So given that peer pressure as an addition, you know, they may feel as if, you know, they have no other option. My encouragement to those young people is to genuinely do everything you can to avoid getting in contact. Like, just stand your ground, say no. If you're in a public space, run. If you can't run, scream. Like, try to cause a scene so that, you know, you're bringing attention, so that you're not alone or feel like you're being backed up into a corner, and the only result is to, you know, get involved with the knife. So yeah, I feel like when it comes to peer pressure, to try do everything. Obviously, it's based on the situation, but do everything in your power so that you're not giving in to peer pressure and doing what's best for you. Like, it's in your best interest.
I think there's some real wisdom in that. It's really tricky. So peer pressure is quite often associated with the element of self-esteem, and young people who have spoken to me and have been exposed to either gangs or criminal exploitation maybe have said that they kind of felt overwhelmed to kind of be part of that group and have that form of identity. So I think it might be really useful for young people to explore elements of identity in safe spaces so that they're not exposed to that peer pressure maybe out on the street. And maybe that's a conversation to have in a youth club, or a conversation to have in a school, or even a conversation to have around a family dinner table is, who am I? Where do I belong? And what do I feel my purpose is going to be for when I'm an adult? Because quite often our young people are not having these kind of conversations, so therefore are going to be pre-exposed to feeling overwhelmed by peer pressure, because essentially what people who are exploiting you are going to do is try and unpick that identity. Well, you can belong with us, you're part of us, you're part of that gang, we're a family. And then all of a sudden you've got language like brother or bruv, and then you've got that aspect of loyalty. But essentially you can have all of those aspects in safe spaces. But if we're not talking about that in safe spaces, then our young people are always going to be vulnerable to that exploitation, and they're always going to be vulnerable to those ideas. And it's ever so natural for people to want to be belonging to something and wanting to have a sense of identity. Young people are developing their brains at that time when they are asking all those relevant questions.
I'd actually add to that in terms of backgrounds, in terms of not everyone born different and raised different. So some may not have that supportive family or supportive friends or that supportive person. But I definitely agree that, you know, these conversations should be brought into schools and youth groups and stuff like that, so that, you know, there is that awareness, because there are children out there and young people out there who may face this and not know how to, you know, respond accordingly. So yeah, I definitely agree. These conversations should be brought into schools and youth groups.
Just to add on to what Dexter was saying as well, I feel like the youth, the younger ones especially, when they are involved with gangs and that, they see it as a flex to other people to try use it against other people whenever they're in danger as well, to try and let them know that they know older people that can protect them. But really it's not a flex for the younger people to be using it against other younger people who are not brought up into that lifestyle of getting into a scene where a knife has been pulled out in front of them, or being peer pressured into doing something. Because I think at schools when you're younger, you get taught not to speak to strangers, not to get involved in all these situations. So I feel like in schools and youth club, it should be brought up more, just so that the kids are aware of it and they understand it more, because if they do get involved in knife crime, then they're just ruining the rest of their lives.
What advice would you give to young people considering carrying a knife or weapon for protection?
I think that's a really difficult question. I think if that was easily answered, we'd be solving a massive problem. I think some self-reflection, or some safe spaces where there can be an element of self-reflection. Why is it that I feel the need to carry a knife or a weapon? What's going on in my life that's making me feel worried? Or is it my environment? Or Is it some of the choices that potentially that I've fallen into? Is it peer pressure? What does that mean for me? My advice to young people is just to be aware that a good percentage of young people who carry knives quite often get hurt by their own knives. It's an ongoing issue for young people. Essentially, what we're talking about is struggling with conflict resolution potentially. So how do I resolve conflict? And if potentially carrying that knife is to resolve a conflict or to protect myself from conflict, do I need some help around what is conflict resolution and how do I do that in a healthy way? Because carrying a knife has massive ramifications. Best case scenario, you're nicked and you've got possession of a blade. Worst case scenario, you've got a GBH murder on your hands. Or you get hurt yourself, you get stabbed yourself with your own blade. So we need to start having conversations with young people about how and what is healthy conflict resolution. What do you guys think about conflict resolution? Would you guys feel comfortable or confident with regards to conflict resolution? Do you understand what that means?
I would say in terms of conflict resolution, I feel like there's always another way. I feel like violence shouldn't always be the answer. And when it comes to knife crimes, it's like you said just a second ago, sometimes the blade that is used is the blade that you bring. And I don't think a lot of people realise that. So really and truly, by choosing to carry a knife, you could be, providing the weapon to your own injury. So it just doesn't make sense. And I feel like when it's like a conflict type thing, I feel like you really need to, sit back and analyse the whole situation and see if there's any situation or any opportunity for it to, either resolve without conflict, without any violence, or if it's a situation where you can just kind of let it go and just carry on with life. Because the whole trying back and forth thing and gang wars and knife wars, it doesn't end well. Simply as that, really and truly. So, and I feel like in reference back to the question, I feel like young people should speak to someone, basically express how they're feeling, say what's going through their mind with someone they can trust, even if they don't have like supportive parent or supportive teacher, like find someone, because I'm sure there are people that would listen. So try to find someone that you can express how you're feeling to, and then kind of seek some advice so that you're not resulting to going straight to carrying a knife, and then you never know what the outcome of that will be. You do, but you don't at the same time. You're taking a big risk of your life.
I think you've made some really, really interesting points. Speaking to trusted adults, speaking to anybody, speaking to your mate, speaking to your brother, speaking to your sister, speaking to anybody who may be willing to listen. And it could be anyone. It could be a youth worker, it could be a social worker, it could be any trusted adult or friend who is willing to sit down and listen. But someone who understands that it's just not as simple as just don't do something. When you feel like you're trapped or you're backed into a corner and that's accompanied with worries and emotions of fear and shame and flight, If you feel like you need to pick up a knife, it's usually because there's some reasons behind that. Someone who isn't going to perhaps treat that as a very simple decision is probably very useful. So because it comes without judgment, and it comes with some pragmatic advice instead of some sort of emotional advice. Ben, what is your understanding or what are your thoughts about all of this topic?
There's no point of doing it. Other people carrying knives, I'd say just that if you know they've got it, stay away. I just don't think people should have possession of any weapons of any sort anywhere.
I also think that the younger people who are carrying knives and are going to use it, or people who are gonna get stabbed or threaten to get stabbed, I feel like the younger people find it harder to open up to people because they see it as snitching or snaking on their friends or other people. And I think a lot of young people need to learn that to snitch or snake, it's not to do the wrong thing, it's to keep you out of trouble and get the people who are doing the bad thing, to get them sorted out by a youth leader or a police officer or someone higher in the rank to come speak to them, have the word with them and question them about if they think it's the right thing to be doing to carry a knife around with them.
What are the current statistics for Bedfordshire regarding possession of a knife and other knife offences?
Okay, so currently Bedfordshire has massively improved the offences with knife crime. I think a few years ago it was quite significant, but actually there's been about a 36% decrease from the ONS stats that have been released. Unfortunately, Bedfordshire appear to be the highest with regards to attempt murders, which is quite problematic. It seems to be a go-to threat, perhaps. But I know that it is a priority for the local community, and I think it is definitely a priority for Bedfordshire Police, and they've been doing loads of stuff in the community to try and reduce this.
How were you impacted as an officer when you attended jobs involving knife crimes, or when you have worked with young people who are affected by knife crime?
As an officer, it's gutting to respond to incidences involving specifically young people and knife crime. I was a taser officer and would quite frequently be sent because of the level of risk. So I had the resources to me in terms of personal safety in order to protect myself and other people from knife crime, and fortunately never had to use that taser for knives, because young people, I believe, when they are spoken to correctly, will usually speak to you correctly as well. So I feel very lucky that I never had to deploy that. But I'm going to be honest, it's absolutely gutting when you attend a job for a young person who has found themselves in a situation where they felt they've had little choice but to carry a blade and potentially even use it, and then see the ramifications of that live. So whether that be the immediate fear of someone who's been stabbed and having to do first aid, which is unreal, and very difficult to process, because you're in flight and flight yourself, when you're dealing with life and death situations. And then when you see the impact that then has on said family members, then the impact that has on a household when potentially there needs to be a search, and then a very, very long and complex court case that follows it. It's really interesting because it's like a very short decision based on very live emotions that do not last forever. So when you feel angry, that burst of anger doesn't last for years. It lasts for 5 minutes, 2 minutes? So a decision based on anger, an instant that lasts a few seconds, has a ramification of a lifetime. So it's absolutely gutting as an officer to experience that. And I think as an exploitation lead for the charity, when I was working with young people who were in very difficult situations, understanding the kind of emotional turmoil that goes on for that young person, and they are experiencing all of these challenges, is almost equally disturbing. So you can see that they are having those kind of reflective moments within themselves as to, what do I want in my life? Why am I making these choices? If I don't change, then this is potentially how I'm going to end up, and having those real life conversations. But watching young people succeed and making right choices is absolutely thrilling. Watching people change and have moments where they succeed and feel safe, that's quite remarkable. So I've seen it on both ends. I've seen the incident and I've seen the change, and know that young people with the right support and the right opportunities can thrive and make some amazing choices.
What do you think are the underlying factors of young people who are affected by knife crime?
It's mainly to do with, I think we mentioned it before, to be fair, just that sense of belonging, or that sense of an image to uphold. So, trying to impress people or trying to act big and bad. And, I feel like once you've, portrayed that image, you feel like even if you regret doing it, you have to kind of maintain it. And if you go back on, this image that you've portrayed, then you might get called things or get bullied, and then it might backfire on you. But I think really and truly, it's just got to do with a sense of fear as well. I feel like people that carry their knives and are actually involved, so they've been in a knife attack, they may regret, their decision once the knife has been used on them. And, all the decisions that they've made up until that moment, nothing else matters. And I feel like also, families and environments can play a big factor as well. Where you've grown up, if you were in a loving family, if you've been in the care system, or you know, if you didn't have parents or stuff like this, these all affect, I think, a young person as they're growing up and still trying to find their way through life and identify who they are. And then obviously these are the times where you may fall into the wrong crowd, and then like we mentioned before, those gangs using certain terms like brother or bruv and stuff like that to kind of make you feel like a sense of belonging.
So what do you guys think would be an alternative decision for young people?
I feel like finding some sort of hobby can always be good. I feel like being productive can always help you take your mind off of things. So for young people, it may be school. So they might have a long day at school or have troubles at school. But if they have that hobby, whether it be music or sports or arts and crafts, finding something to, you know, maintain peace and, you know, keep your mind working and keep you in, well, not necessarily just to keep you inside. Like, there's nothing wrong with being outside, but, you know, being in a happy space mentally, physically, and emotionally, so you're not, you know, vulnerable to these situations in knife crime. And I also feel like maybe even, you know, just surrounding yourself around the right people, uplifting people, supportive people that are going to really help you, you know, better yourself as a person. And especially those people that, you know, may be struggling or going through things, like just finding those people that you can trust and talk to so that you're not ever feeling alone.
Just want to add to that, something as simple as meditation or even praying. Even a lot of religious people fall into the knife crime and they fall into carrying knives. So something as simple as, you know, looking back on your faith, falling back to prayer and using, you know, your religious books to help yourself find the answers to prevent yourself from doing the wrong decisions in life. As an ex-police officer, how do you think the youth see police officers?
In my experience, it's a mixed bag. Some young people are curious and they are happy to engage with the police without any issues. I would say the majority of the young people that I came into contact with as a police officer had a lot of distrust, were worried that they weren't going to be treated fairly. They had the opinion that the police had already determined them as potentially criminals and didn't like feeling that way. So automatically that creates a distrust and a barrier to cooperation. And then young people feel like they are victimised by police sometimes. So I'd say that it's very different. So young people potentially that I didn't come into contact as a police officer were very happy to engage. Young people who potentially are coming into contact with the police feel a lot of distrust and they have a lack of faith in the system. A lot of the young people who I spoke to would quite often express feeling like they are going to be continuously stopped, continuously accused of doing things that they believe they're not doing, and then that creates a cycle of distrust and negative feelings towards the police.
Why is that?
I'm not sure I would like to answer that question as a previous police officer. However, I'm quite happy to answer that question as a previous exploitation lead. Potentially, from what I understand from young people and what they've told me, when young people are potentially engaged with crime, they're not doing that all the time. Okay, so quite a lot of the time, the young people are genuinely just going about their business. So would report being subject to maybe a stop and search when they haven't actually got any articles or any drugs or anything like that, and feeling harassed by that sort of behaviour. So for a very small period of time, a young person may have some drugs on them or may have a weapon on them, but actually they don't choose to do that 100% of that time. So would report that they are potentially harassed. And there have been times since leaving the police force, and I have engaged with young people where they have had credible complaints, potentially, that not so much in Bedfordshire, but in other areas as well, that they have felt harassed and they have felt accused when innocent, potentially, at that time, feeling like they have been labelled and stereotyped. Maybe young people who choose to hang about in large groups, when actually, which is a natural need and want for a young person, to then be treated as maybe being antisocial, for example, and then being asked to disperse an area which is maybe a playing field and quite credible for a young person to maybe want to hang around. So I think that there's a lot of stereotypes for young people. They have reported to feeling harassed and victimised. I think it's really difficult for the police to navigate those feelings, and I think it would be really unfair on me to kind of answer that as an ex-police officer, because they have a really difficult job to do. And when you are trying to keep people safe and you are trying to use resources which are credible, like, so when you are looking at resources like stop and search, when you've got really decent officers who are genuinely looking at the grounds and genuinely protecting the public, genuinely finding the drugs, genuinely finding weapons, and genuinely keeping people safe, to then find that you can't do that job easily because you are faced with potentially other actions of people who are stopping and searching anyone, and not finding the drugs and not finding the weapons, and then causing those feelings of young people who are potentially feeling harassed. All of that is just it's not very useful, to be fair. And they do a difficult job, and it is unsafe, and I think that needs to be recognised.
If the young people need help, where should they go to?
They can go to Bedfordshire Police, Bedfordshire Borough Unit, Childline, the Exploitation Reduction Unit, go St Giles Trust, who have a specialist worker at the hospital, Everyone's Gang, who work in Bedford and were originally located in London, 4YP and Sporting Aid will be able to help.
Alright, that's all for today. Thank you everyone for sharing your thoughts and ideas, and thank you to our professions for helping us out today.
This is Next Generation Podcast, a Sporting Aid project produced by Ragdoll Media, made possible with the help of Safer Streets Bedfordshire, Bedfordshire Community Foundation, Bedford Borough Council, Bedfordshire Police, 4YP UK and Nexus Mentoring.